My name is Eleanor. I'm 28 years old, and I've built what I consider a successful life as a tech professional in Seattle. But yesterday, I got a call from my dad and stepmom after barely hearing from them for years. Suddenly, they need me to quit my dream job to help my stepbrother. The same stepbrother they always put first. The same family that never had time for me. I'm still shaking. Before I tell you about the call that turned everything upside down, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to never miss true stories about complicated families like mine. Growing up, I had what most would consider a happy childhood, at least until I turned 12. My mom and dad created a warm home filled with laughter, weekend trips to the coast, and holiday traditions that I cherished. Mom was my rock, the person who taught me to stand up for myself and pursue my passions. She encouraged my early interest in computers, buying me my first laptop when I was 10, even when money was tight. Everything changed when Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. The disease took her quickly within 8 months of diagnosis. I watched helplessly as she faded away, and with her so did the light in our home. Dad became a shell of himself, drowning in grief and medical bills. He would come home from work, stare at the TV, and barely acknowledge my existence. For 2 years, we lived like ghosts in the same house. I learned to cook simple meals, do my own laundry, and essentially parent myself. Dad wasn't cruel, just absent emotionally. He'd provide the basics, but the connection we once shared disappeared with Mom. I felt like I'd lost both parents instead of just one. Then when I was 14, Dad introduced me to Stephanie. She was 11 years younger than him, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. I remember trying so hard to like her, to form some kind of bond. I thought maybe our family could heal. "Your dad deserves happiness again," she told me during our first dinner together. "And you need a woman's influence." The way she said it made it clear she thought I was lacking in some fundamental way. They married quickly within 6 months of meeting. The wedding was small, but I wasn't included in any planning. When I asked if I could invite my best friend for support, Stephanie said, "This is an adult celebration, Eleanor. Not everything is about you." From the beginning, Stephanie treated our home like her domain and me like an unwelcome houseguest. She'd rearrange my things without asking comment on my appearance and suggest I needed to lose weight or dress differently. Dad never intervened. He seemed almost relieved to have someone else handle the parenting he'd been struggling with. When I turned 15, Stephanie announced her pregnancy. Dad was overjoyed, transforming back into the animated, excited person I remembered from before Mom died. I was hopeful at first, thinking a new baby might help us become a real family again. Jackson was born just after my 16th birthday. From that moment, it was like I became completely invisible in our house. Every conversation centered around Jackson. Every decision was made with Jackson's needs in mind. My academic achievements, my struggles with grief over Mom, my normal teenage needs, all fell by the wayside. "Jackson needs quiet to nap" became the reason I couldn't play music in my room. "Jackson needs this bedroom because it gets better light" became the reason I had to move into the smaller room in the basement. "We can't attend your honor ceremony because Jackson has a cold" became one of many excuses for why my accomplishments were never celebrated. I still remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, something that had required immense work while dealing with my home situation. Dad and Stephanie showed up late with 8-year-old Jackson, complaining loudly throughout my speech. They left immediately after not even staying for the reception or photos. "Jackson's getting restless," Dad explained, not meeting my eyes. "You understand." I always had to understand. I always had to be mature. I always had to sacrifice. There was another particularly painful evening when I was 18. I had reached the final round for a prestigious college scholarship that could have covered my entire tuition. The interview was scheduled for a Tuesday evening, and I needed Dad to drive me since it was across town, and we only had one car. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," he said, not looking up from helping Jackson with his baseball gear. Jackson has practice tonight. It's the championship game next week. Dad, this is my future. This scholarship could be the difference between me going to college or not. He sighed, finally meeting my gaze. I know it's important, but Jackson's counting on me. Can't you take the bus? The bus would have required 3 transfers and gotten me there too late. I ended up calling my English teacher, who drove 40 minutes out of her way to take me. I got the scholarship, but no one at home celebrated with me. There wasn't even an acknowledgement beyond Stephanie saying, "Well, that's convenient for your dad and me, isn't it?" Throughout all these years, Stephanie never missed an opportunity to remind me that I should be grateful they allowed me to continue living with them. Many men wouldn't want to raise another woman's child, she would say, as if my dad wasn't my actual father. As if I was some burden they had charitably taken on. I tried so hard to maintain a relationship with my dad. I'd invite him for coffee on weekends, just the two of us. He'd agree, then cancel last minute because Jackson had a play date or Stephanie needed the car. I'd save up to buy him thoughtful gifts that referenced our old shared jokes or interests, only to see them unused or forgotten. By the time I finished high school, I knew I had to get out. There was nothing left for me in that house except painful reminders of my status as an afterthought. I applied to colleges far from home, accepting the one with the best computer science program that my scholarship would cover. The day I left, Stephanie seemed relieved. Dad helped load my few boxes into the car, gave me an awkward hug, and said, "Make us proud." I wondered if he even knew who I had become over those years of neglect. Leaving home for college was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. For the first time, I didn't have to walk on eggshells in my own living space or compete for basic attention. But I also had to figure out how to support myself completely on my own. My scholarship covered tuition and basic dorm housing, but nothing else. I immediately found a job at the campus coffee shop, working early mornings before classes. On weekends and evenings, I picked up shifts at a local tech repair store, where I could also build practical skills related to my major. Between my 2 jobs and a full course load in computer science, I barely slept that first year. There were nights I'd cry from exhaustion, wondering why everything had to be so hard for me, when I knew Jackson would never have to struggle this way. Dad and Stephanie were already talking about his college fund when he was just 9 years old. Despite the challenges, I thrived academically. Computers made sense to me in a way people often didn't. There were clear rules, logical consequences, and solutions that could be found with enough persistence. I loved the satisfaction of solving complex problems and building things that worked. During my sophomore year, I met Professor Sarah Jenkins. She noticed me staying after class to work on extra projects and took me under her wing. Sarah became the first adult since my mom, who seemed genuinely interested in my growth and well-being. "Eleanor, you have exceptional talent," she told me after reviewing my midterm project. "But you push yourself too hard. What's driving you?" Something about her genuine concern broke through the walls I'd built. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything about my home situation, my lost relationship with my father, and how I felt I had to succeed, because I had absolutely no safety net. Sarah listened without judgment, then shared that she had been estranged from her own family for different but equally painful reasons. "Sometimes the family we create for ourselves is more important than the one we're born into," she said. "And Eleanor, you deserve people who see your worth." Through Sarah's mentorship program, I met Mike, a senior developer at a local tech company, who became my internship supervisor junior year. He was tough but fair, pushing me to excellence while also making sure I developed healthy work habits. "The industry will always demand more," he warned me. "You have to be the one to set boundaries and take care of yourself, because burnout is real, and it can derail even the most promising careers." That advice was revolutionary to someone who had always been expected to give endlessly without receiving in return. In my dorm, I was randomly assigned to room with Diana, an international student from Brazil studying business. She took one look at my sparse side of the room, and immediate exhaustion, and decided I needed looking after. "This will not do," she declared in her musical accent. "You cannot live with only 2 outfits and no decorations. We fix this now." Diana dragged me to thrift stores, insisted I join her for proper meals instead of the granola bars I'd been subsisting on, and introduced me to her wide circle of friends. Through her, I learned that friendship could be easy and joyful rather than conditional. These 3 people became my chosen family. We spent holidays together when returning to my father's home became too painful. They celebrated my achievements, supported me through setbacks, and never made me feel like I was a burden or an afterthought. During those years, my contact with Dad and Stephanie became increasingly sporadic. I'd call on holidays, but conversations were brief and one-sided. I'd hear all about Jackson's latest accomplishments, but when I tried to share news about my internships or academic awards, Dad would suddenly need to go or pass the phone to Stephanie, who would inevitably cut me short. "That's nice, Eleanor. Jackson just made the travel baseball team, did your father tell you? Such an athlete. The coach says he's got natural talent." I stopped trying to visit after sophomore year when I spent 3 days at home over Christmas and Dad and Stephanie went to Jackson's basketball tournament for 2 of them, leaving me alone in the house. The message was clear. I wasn't a priority. Instead, I poured myself into building my future. I graduated with honors, with Mike attending the ceremony and cheering loudly when my name was called. Through his recommendation and my proven abilities, I landed a job at one of Seattle's top tech firms, working on innovative cloud security solutions. Starting my career in Seattle, 3 states away from my father's home, gave me the physical and emotional distance I needed. I found a tiny studio apartment and gradually furnished it with carefully chosen items that brought me joy. For the first time, I had a space that was truly mine, where every decision was made to please only myself. Over the next 5 years, I worked my way up from junior developer to project manager, then to team lead. I saved, aggressively remembering the financial insecurity of my youth, and eventually put a down payment on a small but modern condo overlooking Lake Union. I dated, occasionally made new friends through work and community activities, and developed hobbies I'd never had time for before. I joined a hiking group, took cooking classes, and even tried rock climbing. Each new experience helped me discover parts of myself that had been suppressed during those years of trying to be small and undemanding in my father's house. My relationship with Dad remained distant but civil. We exchanged obligatory birthday and Christmas calls. I sent gifts for Jackson, trying to be the bigger person, despite the jealousy I still sometimes felt. I made peace with the fact that we would never be close, that I would never get the fatherly love and support I had craved as a teenager. Or at least, I thought I had made peace with it until last month. At 28, I had finally been selected to lead an international project working with our new Japanese partners to develop integrated security protocols. This opportunity represented everything I had worked for: recognition of my technical skills, trust in my leadership abilities, and the chance to make connections that could propel my career forward. I was scheduled to fly to Tokyo in 2 weeks for a month-long stay, working directly with their development team. My bags were half-packed. My presentations prepared, my Japanese language app showing impressive progress for a beginner. That's when the phone rang, displaying my father's number, a rare enough occurrence that I immediately felt uneasy. "Eleanor, it's Dad." His voice had that forced cheerfulness I recognized from childhood, the tone he used when he wanted something. "Hi, Dad. This is unexpected." I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder while continuing to fold clothes for my trip. "Can a father call his daughter just to catch up?" he asked, chuckling in a way that sounded rehearsed. "How have you been? Work going well?" This was already strange. Dad never asked detailed questions about my life. Our calls typically consisted of me asking questions while he gave brief answers before redirecting to topics about Jackson. "I'm actually really good. Just got selected to lead an international project. I'm flying to Japan in 2 weeks." "Japan? Wow, that's..." That's impressive, honey. There was a pause, then the sound of a hand covering the receiver and muffled voices. Stephanie's here too. She wants to say hi. Before I could respond, Stephanie's overly bright voice came through the speaker. Eleanor, it's been too long since we've really talked. Japan sounds exciting. Your father and I were just saying how proud we are of you, aren't we, Richard? I nearly dropped the phone. In 14 years, I couldn't remember Stephanie ever expressing pride in anything I'd done. Something was definitely off. Thanks, I said cautiously. It's a big opportunity. And well-deserved, I'm sure, Stephanie continued. You know we've been keeping up with you through your social media. That new condo looks lovely. Seattle must be treating you well. Now I knew something was up. Stephanie had never once commented on any of my social media posts, though she regularly shared dozens of photos of Jackson with gushing captions about his every achievement. It is, I replied. So, what's going on? You two don't usually call on a random Tuesday. There was that muffled conversation again. Then Dad came back on the line. Well, since you asked, we do have some exciting news to share. Jackson got accepted to the University of Washington full-ride academic scholarship for computer engineering. Can you believe it? Following in your footsteps, after all. The familiar sting returned, that special pain of hearing Jackson praised for accomplishments that had gone unacknowledged when I achieved them. I'd received multiple scholarship offers, including one to UW, but there had been no celebratory call to relatives when I did. That's great, I managed. Congratulations to him. He's always been so bright, Stephanie interjected, apparently on speakerphone now. The teachers say he has a natural aptitude for technology. Must run in the family, right? I bit back the urge to point out that we shared no biological connection whatsoever. Anyway, Dad continued, Jackson also got this amazing internship opportunity in Seattle for the summer before school starts, at Rainier Tech Solutions. Have you heard of them? My stomach dropped. Rainier Tech was one of our biggest competitors and a company we occasionally collaborated with on industry-wide initiatives. Yes, I'm familiar with them. It's such a prestigious position, Stephanie gushed. Only 5 students selected nationally. Starts in 3 weeks. The timing suddenly clicked. 3 weeks? My Japan trip. That's nice, I said slowly. So, will you two be helping him move to Seattle? Another pause. Dad cleared his throat. Well, that's actually why we're calling. We thought since you're already established there, have that nice condo and all. We hoped Jackson could stay with you, Stephanie finished. Just until he finds his footing. And we were thinking, since you know the industry so well, maybe you could show him around, introduce him to your colleagues, help him network. I sat down on my bed, my half-packed suitcase now forgotten. I see. Did you happen to remember that I mentioned I'm leaving for Japan in 2 weeks for a month? About that, Dad said, his voice taking on the wheedling tone I remembered from childhood, the one he used when asking me to give up something for Jackson. We were hoping you might be able to postpone that trip, just for a little while. Jackson really needs a smooth start, and having family there would make all the difference. Family. The word felt hollow after years of being treated like an outsider. Postpone my international business trip, the one I've been preparing for months, the one that could determine my future at the company. My voice rose with each question. It's just that this is such a critical time for Jackson, Stephanie said, as if I hadn't spoken. First time away from home, new city, prestigious internship. He needs support. And what about what I need? The words escaped before I could stop them. Eleanor, Dad sighed. This is your chance to do something meaningful for the family. To be there for your brother, like I know your mother would have wanted. The mention of my mother wielded like a weapon made my blood boil. She would never have expected me to sacrifice my career for anyone, least of all, for the child who had replaced me in my father's affections. Has Jackson looked at apartments? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Student housing roommate listings? Well, no, Stephanie admitted. We thought this would be the perfect solution. You have the space, you know the city, you work in the same industry. And the timing with your trip? Well, we just thought family should come first, Dad added. I took a deep breath. So let me make sure I understand. Jackson needs a place to stay in Seattle, and you want me to not only give him my home, but also postpone a career-defining international assignment to personally help him settle in. When you put it that way, it sounds so transactional, Stephanie said with a nervous laugh. We're talking about family here. Family? I repeated. Right. Just think about it, okay? Dad pleaded. Call us back tomorrow. I know you'll make the right decision. The right decision was clearly the one that prioritized Jackson, just as it had always been. I'll think about it, I said finally, knowing I needed to end this conversation before I said something I couldn't take back. I have to go now. After hanging up, I sat motionless on my bed, surrounded by the clothes I'd been so excitedly packing for Japan. 14 years of suppressed anger, hurt, and resentment threatened to overwhelm me. After all this time, after building my own life without their help, they still expected me to sacrifice everything for Jackson. The audacity was breathtaking. The morning after that phone call, I woke up with puffy eyes and a throbbing headache. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with memories, arguments I wished I'd made, and the familiar feeling of being valued less than Jackson. I called in sick to work, something I almost never did, and texted Diana. Despite living in different cities now, we'd remained close, and she knew my family history better than anyone. 2 hours later, we were sitting at my kitchen table, mugs of coffee between us. Diana had moved to Seattle 3 years ago for her own job in marketing, and her presence had been a blessing during difficult moments like this one. They want you to do what? Diana exclaimed after I recounted the conversation. Postpone your Japan trip to babysit your adult stepbrother. Are they serious? Completely serious? I confirmed. And you know what kills me? Part of me actually considered it for a minute. Like maybe if I do this one thing, they'll finally see me, finally value me. Diana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Ellie, honey, how many times have you done something hoping for their approval? Has it ever worked? I shook my head, remembering countless occasions, the straight A report cards that went unremarked. The cooking I'd done trying to impress Stephanie, the gifts I'd chosen carefully for Dad that he never seemed to use. You know what this is? Diana continued. It's the same pattern. They ignore you when they don't need anything, then suddenly you're family when you have something they want. I know you're right. But then Dad mentioned Mom said she would have wanted me to help family, and it hit me in this vulnerable place I didn't even know I still had. Diana's eyes flashed with anger. That's manipulative as hell. Your mom would want you to be valued and respected, not treated like a convenience. I sipped my coffee, trying to sort through my tangled emotions. The thing is, I don't even have anything against Jackson personally. He was just a kid, you know. It's not his fault Dad and Stephanie played favorites, but the entitlement of them assuming I'd put my career on hold. Have you considered that maybe Jackson doesn't even know how they've treated you? Have you ever talked to him directly without them as intermediaries? I hadn't. Jackson and I had never had a real relationship. He was 11 years younger, and by the time he was old enough for meaningful conversation, I was already gone from the house, relegated to brief holiday visits. I should probably find out more about this internship, I said, pulling out my laptop. Rainier Tech is a major player. We sometimes collaborate with them on industry standards projects. A quick search through my professional network revealed that the internship was indeed prestigious, but also that applications had closed months ago. On a hunch, I messaged a colleague who had moved to Rainier last year. While waiting for a response, Diana and I talked through my options. The Japan trip was non-negotiable from my perspective. I'd worked too hard for this opportunity, and postponing would send a terrible message to my superiors about my priorities and commitment. But there were other considerations. Did I owe Jackson anything as his half-sister? Would I be perpetuating the cycle of family dysfunction by refusing to help? Was there a middle ground that wouldn't require me to sacrifice my career? My phone pinged with a response from my former colleague. The message confirmed my suspicions. "Well, this is interesting," I told Diana, reading the message. According to Mark at Rainier, the summer internship cohort was finalized in February. But they did add one more position recently after receiving a compelling recommendation from someone with connections at our company. "Want to bet who that someone might be?" Diana raised an eyebrow. "You think they used your name to get Jackson in?" "It wouldn't surprise me. Dad knows where I work. He could have mentioned the connection." The thought of my name being used without my knowledge or consent added another layer to my anger. That night alone in my apartment, I barely slept again. Part of me wanted to call them back immediately and tell them exactly what I thought of their request. Another part, the wounded child still seeking approval, whispered that maybe this was a chance to finally be seen as valuable in their eyes. I found myself remembering specific moments of exclusion and favoritism that I'd tried to forget. The Christmas when Jackson received a gaming console and dozens of games while I got a generic sweater. The time Dad took Jackson on a special weekend fishing trip, just the two of them, something he and I had never done. The family photos on my father's desk at work, none of which included me. These memories cycled through my mind, intensifying my resentment, but also my confusion. What was the right thing to do here? Where was the line between healthy boundaries and family obligation? The next day, I reached out to Sarah, my former professor who had become a mentor and friend. Now in her 60s, Sarah had navigated her own complex family dynamics and always offered wisdom without judgment. We met at a quiet cafe near her university office. Her silver hair was cut in the same practical bob she'd always worn, and her eyes were as sharp and kind as ever. "Eleanor," she said after listening to the whole story, "what would you tell one of your team members if they came to you with this situation?" I considered the question. "I'd tell them they have no obligation to derail their career for someone else's convenience, that they should set clear boundaries." "And yet you're hesitating to take that same advice. Why?" "Because—" I struggled to articulate it. "Because it's family. Because maybe this one sacrifice would finally make my dad see me. And because saying no feels like I'm being the same kind of selfish they've always been." Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand that. But consider this: enabling people who have consistently taken you for granted isn't actually helping them. It's reinforcing unhealthy patterns." She told me about her own experience setting boundaries with her alcoholic mother, how painful it had been to step back, but how necessary for both their sakes. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that loving someone sometimes means refusing to participate in harmful dynamics, even when they call you selfish for it. Her words resonated deeply. I'd spent so many years trying to be the bigger person to rise above the hurt and still offer love to a family that consistently overlooked me. But at what cost? "The Japan opportunity is crucial for your career," Sarah continued. "If you give that up for Jackson now, what will they ask for next? Where does it end? So you think I should refuse completely? I think you should honor your commitments to yourself and your career. But that doesn't mean you can't offer Jackson some help within boundaries that respect your needs too." By the time I left Sarah, I felt clearer about my decision, though not necessarily happier. Setting boundaries with family is rarely a joyful process, especially when you know your boundaries will be seen as rejection. I spent that evening researching affordable housing options near the University of Washington and Rainier Tech's offices. There were summer sublets available from students' reasonably priced shared houses, even extended stay hotels that wouldn't break the bank for someone with an internship stipend. I also reached out to a few industry contacts who might be willing to meet with Jackson, offer advice, maybe even become mentors. None of this required me to sacrifice my own opportunity or turn my life upside down. As I compiled this information, I felt a growing resolve. I would not be made to feel guilty for prioritizing the career I had built without their support. I would not postpone my trip to Tokyo. But I could offer Jackson practical help that respected my own boundaries. The question now was how to deliver this message in a way that might actually be heard. After 3 days of reflection and preparation, I called my father. "We need to talk in person," I said. "I'll be in town this weekend. Let's meet." There was a pause. "Can't we discuss this over the phone? Stephanie and I were hoping you'd made your decision already." "This needs to be in person," I insisted. "Saturday 11 a.m. at Riverside Coffee downtown. I'll be there for 1 hour." To my surprise, he agreed without further argument. Perhaps the firmness in my voice conveyed that I wasn't going to be easily swayed this time. That Saturday, I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where we could have some privacy. My heart was pounding as I spotted my father entering Stephanie close behind him. What I hadn't expected was Jackson trailing after them, looking tall and lanky, and surprisingly grown up from the teenager I'd last seen at a forced family dinner 2 years ago. Dad spotted me and waved his smile tight and uncertain. They made their way over, and there was an awkward moment of greeting. Dad leaned in for a half hug that I reluctantly returned. Stephanie nodded stiffly. Jackson gave a small wave, looking uncomfortable. "Eleanor," Dad began once we were all seated with drinks. "You're looking well. Seattle must agree with you." "It does," I said, taking a deep breath to center myself. "I'm going to get straight to the point. I've given your request a lot of thought." "We knew you would," Stephanie interjected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Family has always been important to you, just like your father." I resisted the urge to point out the irony in her statement. "I cannot postpone my trip to Japan," I said clearly. "This project is crucial for my career and the dates are not flexible. I also cannot offer Jackson housing in my condo. I'll be gone for a month, and even when I return, my space is not set up for a roommate situation." Dad's face fell, and Stephanie's mouth pinched into a tight line. Jackson looked at the table, his expression unreadable. However, I continued pulling out a folder. "I've researched some alternatives. There are several affordable housing options near both the university and Rainier Tech. I've compiled information on all of them, including contact details. I've also reached out to 3 of my industry contacts who are willing to meet with Jackson, offer guidance, and help him network. Their information is in here as well." I slid the folder across the table. No one reached for it. "Eleanor," Dad said, his voice taking on that disappointed tone I knew so well. "This isn't about information. Jackson needs family support in a new city. He needs someone looking out for him." "I understand that," I replied. "But I have commitments I cannot break, and I'm offering the support I'm able to give." Stephanie's face flushed with anger. "This is the most selfish thing I've ever heard. After all we've done for you." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It burst out of me before I could stop it, born from years of swallowed responses to her revisionist history. "What exactly have you done for me, Stephanie? Please enlighten me." "We raised you," she shot back. "We put a roof over your head, food on the table." Dad did those things because he was legally obligated to as my parent, and even those basics came with constant reminders that I was a burden, that Jackson's needs always came first. I turned to my father. "When was the last time you celebrated any achievement of mine? When did you ever put my needs first, even once?" Dad looked genuinely confused. "I don't know what you're talking about. We've always treated you and Jackson the same." His blindness to reality was staggering. "Really? Where were you when I graduated as valedictorian? Oh, right, leaving early because Jackson was bored. Where were you when I needed a ride to my scholarship interview, choosing Jackson's baseball practice instead? Where were you every single time I needed a parent?" The coffee shop suddenly felt too quiet. Jackson was staring at me with wide eyes, as if seeing me for the first time. "That's ancient history," Dad muttered. "Families have rough patches." "It's not ancient history to me. It's the foundation of our relationship or lack thereof. I built my life without your support. I put myself through college, found my own mentors, created my own success. I don't owe you or Stephanie anything, and I certainly don't owe Jackson the derailment of my career." Stephanie stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "I will not sit here and be spoken to this way. Richard, we're leaving." Dad looked torn, but started to stand. I wasn't finished. "If you leave now, you're doing exactly what you've always done, running away, rather than facing the truth about how you've treated me." Something in my voice must have reached him, because he slowly sat back down. Stephanie remained standing, her face a mask of indignation. "You've rewritten history to make yourselves the generous parents, the ones who did everything right," I continued. "But I was there. I lived it. I was the child watching her father turn away again and again in favor of his new family." "That is not true," Dad insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Tell me one thing you did for me that you didn't do doubly for Jackson. One time, you put my needs first." His silence was answer enough. Jackson, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke. "I didn't know any of this," he said softly. "They always told me you were distant because you were focused on your career, that you chose to be apart from us." I looked at my half-brother, really seeing him without the lens of jealousy for the first time. He was just a kid who had been fed a narrative that wasn't his fault. "That's not accurate," I told him directly. "I left because there wasn't room for me. Every achievement, every need, every interest of mine was secondary to yours. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because of choices they made." "This is ridiculous," Stephanie cut in. "We're not going to sit here and be attacked. Jackson, let's go." Jackson didn't move. "I want to hear what Eleanor has to say." Stephanie's face darkened. "Fine. Richard and I will wait in the car. 5 minutes, Jackson." She stormed out, my father trailing behind her after one last conflicted look at me. Alone with Jackson, I felt the anger drain out of me, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion. "Is that really how it was?" he asked. "Yes, but it wasn't your fault. You were a child." He shook his head. "I always wondered why you never came around much, why there seemed to be this tension. They made it sound like you just didn't want to be part of the family." "I wanted that more than anything," I said quietly. "I just wasn't given the choice." Jackson stared into his coffee cup. "So, about the internship and housing. The resources in that folder are real," I told him. "I'm willing to help you from a distance. You can email me questions, I'll make introductions. But I can't sacrifice my own opportunity, and I won't apologize for that boundary." He nodded slowly. "I understand, and I think maybe I need to learn to stand on my own too, not just rely on family to smooth the way." He picked up the folder. "Thanks for this. It's actually more concrete help than they've given me about the move." As Jackson left to join Dad and Stephanie in the car, I remained at the table feeling both drained and somehow lighter. For the first time in my adult life, I had spoken my truth to my father without filtering it through the need for his approval. I had set a boundary and held it even in the face of manipulation and anger. The guilt I had anticipated feeling never materialized. Instead, there was a quiet certainty that I had finally done right by myself. 2 weeks later, I boarded my flight to Tokyo. The days leading up to my departure had been a whirlwind of preparation, both professional and personal. After the confrontation at the coffee shop, I hadn't heard directly from my father or Stephanie. Their silence a familiar response to any assertion of my independence. What had surprised me was receiving an email from Jackson 3 days after our meeting. It was brief but thoughtful, thanking me for the housing resources and asking a few specific questions about Seattle neighborhoods. I had responded with honest advice, and we'd exchanged a few more messages, since each one carefully respectful of boundaries, but gradually building something that felt like the beginning of an actual relationship. As the plane took off, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was still sadness for the family connection I had craved and never received, but also pride in myself for not sacrificing my hard-won opportunities. Most surprisingly, there was a tentative hope that perhaps, through my honest confrontation, something might begin to change, if not with my father and Stephanie, then at least with Jackson. Tokyo was everything I had hoped for and more. The city's blend of ancient tradition and cutting-edge technology fascinated me, and the work itself was challenging in all the right ways. Our Japanese partners appreciated my attention to detail and willingness to adapt to their work culture while bringing my own expertise to the table. Each day brought new professional challenges that stretched my abilities and confirmed I had made the right choice in prioritizing this opportunity. The project involved integrating advanced security protocols across different platforms, requiring both technical knowledge and diplomacy as we navigated cultural differences in approach. In my second week there, I received another email from Jackson. He had found a small apartment near campus, sharing with 2 other interns from different companies. He was settling into his role at Rainier Tech and had connected with one of the industry contacts I'd provided. I didn't realize how much has always been done for me until I had to figure things out myself, he wrote. It's hard, but also kind of satisfying. Anyway, I wanted to say thanks again for the push toward independence. I think I needed it. Reading between the lines, I suspected things might be tense between Jackson and our parents. While part of me felt guilty for potentially causing family discord, a stronger part recognized that perhaps this separation was healthy for him too. The following week, Jackson's emails became more frequent and revealing. He shared that he'd been having difficult conversations with our father and Stephanie about the way they had characterized me all these years. I started asking questions after meeting you, he wrote. Like why there are no pictures of you in the house after age 14, why they never talked about your college graduation or career successes. The answers were really illuminating. He went on to explain that Stephanie had become defensive while our father had seemed genuinely confused, as if he had never considered his own behavior from my perspective. I think Dad might actually be realizing some things, Jackson wrote. He got really quiet after I asked why they never visited you in Seattle all these years. He couldn't give me an answer. These messages gave me a strange sense of validation mixed with lingering sadness. It shouldn't have taken my half-brother's questioning to make my father reflect on his treatment of me, but perhaps that was the only way it could have happened. By the time I returned from Japan, the project had been a tremendous success, leading to my promotion to senior project manager. Walking back into my Seattle condo felt like returning to a sanctuary I had created for myself, one that reflected my values and achievements. A few days after my return, Jackson asked if we could meet for coffee. He had been in Seattle for almost 2 months now, and from his emails seemed to be thriving in his independence. The young man who met me at the cafe near Pike Place Market looked different from the one I'd seen with our parents. There was a new confidence in his posture, a self-awareness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I got my own place last month, he told me after we'd exchanged greetings. Just a studio, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I'm even paying for it myself with the internship stipend plus some barista work on weekends. That's impressive, I said, genuinely meaning it. How's the internship going? Really good. Challenging, but in the right ways. And he hesitated. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how things were for you growing up. I nodded, letting him continue. I've been watching how Stephanie talks about you, how Dad acts when your name comes up. It's like they have this narrative where you're the difficult one, the one who abandoned family. But that doesn't match what I see or what I remember. He described memories that were surfacing now that he was looking with fresh eyes, the way Stephanie would dismiss my achievements while celebrating his how Dad would change the subject when I called during holidays, the subtle ways they had shaped his perception of me as distant and uncaring. The thing is, Jackson continued, I think I was their excuse. As long as they were doing everything for Jackson, they could justify any behavior, even pushing you away. His insight was surprisingly mature, and I told him so. I've had to grow up fast these last couple months, he said with a small smile. Being truly on your own will do that. Before we parted, Jackson mentioned that Dad and Stephanie were still not speaking to me, but that things between them seemed strained as well. Dad's asking questions now that Stephanie doesn't want to answer. I think he's starting to see some things clearly for the first time. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of me wanted to hope for reconciliation for my father, to finally acknowledge the pain his choices had caused. Another part had made peace with the reality that some relationships cannot be healed, only accepted for what they are. What I did know was that I was proud of my choices, proud that I had honored my commitments to myself and my career, proud that I had offered help within boundaries I could maintain. Proud that I had finally spoken my truth after years of silence. As the weeks passed, Jackson and I developed a tentative friendship, getting together occasionally for coffee or a meal, carefully building a relationship separate from our parents' influence. It was a strange and unexpected outcome of the whole situation, but one I gradually came to treasure. A year after the confrontation at the coffee shop, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have predicted. The success of the Japan project had accelerated my career, leading to a senior leadership position overseeing international security initiatives. I had my own team now and the respect of colleagues who valued both my technical skills and my leadership style. My relationship with Jackson had continued to evolve in positive ways. He had excelled in his internship and was now thriving as a sophomore at UW, maintaining his independence while occasionally seeking my advice on career decisions or technical challenges. We had developed a genuine sibling bond, one based on mutual respect rather than shared history. Throughout this time, my father and Stephanie had maintained their distance, though Jackson occasionally updated me on their lives. Apparently, my confrontation had triggered ongoing tensions in their marriage. Stephanie resented my father's increasing questions about their treatment of me, while he struggled to reconcile his memories with the reality I had described, and Jackson now confirmed. So, I was surprised one evening to see an email from my father in my inbox, subject line simply, "Can we talk?" The message was brief. "Eleanor, I've been doing a lot of thinking over this past year. There are things I need to say to you if you're willing to listen. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to talk." I stared at those words for a long time, emotions churning. Part of me wanted to ignore it to protect the peace and clarity I'd found. But another part, perhaps the little girl who had always longed for her father's recognition, wanted to hear what he had to say. After consulting with both Diana and Sarah, I agreed to meet him the next time I visited Jackson, suggesting a public place where I could leave if things became difficult. My father agreed to all my conditions without protest, another sign that something had indeed changed. 3 weeks later, I sat across from him at a quiet restaurant, taking in the new lines on his face, the gray that now dominated his once dark hair. He looked older, more worn than I remembered. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, his voice uncertain. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't either," I admitted. He nodded, accepting this. "I owe you an apology, Eleanor. Many apologies, actually. But I don't think words can really address the depth of what I've come to realize this past year." "Which is," I prompted when he paused. "That I failed you." His voice cracked slightly. "After your mother died, I was so lost in my own grief that I couldn't see yours. And then when Stephanie came along, It was easier to start fresh than to face the damage I'd already done. I sat silently, letting him continue. Jackson has been very direct with me about his observations, about how Stephanie and I treated you versus him. At first, I denied it, told him he didn't understand. But he kept pushing, kept asking questions I couldn't answer. Dad explained that he and Stephanie were now separated, headed for divorce. The confrontation at the coffee shop had begun a process of questioning that eventually revealed fundamental problems in their relationship, particularly Stephanie's jealousy of his first marriage and any reminders of it, including me. "That's not an excuse," he added quickly. "I was the parent. I should have protected you, should have ensured you felt loved and valued. Instead, I let Stephanie dictate the terms of our family dynamic, and I looked away when it hurt you, because acknowledging that hurt would have meant facing my own failures." I felt tears gathering, but refused to let them fall. "You have no idea how long I waited to hear you acknowledge any of this." "I know, and I know that this conversation is years too late. I don't expect forgiveness, Eleanor. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering painful memories and missed opportunities. He listened without defensiveness as I described specific moments that had shaped my perception of my worth in the family. He shared his own struggles with grief and the misguided belief that a clean slate with a new family would somehow heal him. "None of that justifies how I treated you," he concluded. "You deserved so much better." As we prepared to leave, Dad hesitantly asked if we might stay in touch, perhaps meet occasionally when I was in town visiting Jackson. "No pressure," he added, "and I'll understand completely if you're not interested." I considered his request carefully. "I think we could try," I said finally. "But I need you to understand that I have boundaries now, strong ones, and I won't compromise them even for the relationship we might rebuild." He nodded, seeming to genuinely understand. "That's more than fair, and probably exactly what you need after everything I put you through." Walking away from that conversation, I felt neither the elation of perfect resolution nor the heaviness of continued resentment. Instead, there was a quiet sense of closing a chapter, of setting down a burden I had carried for too long. Over the months that followed, my father and I established a cautious new relationship. We spoke occasionally by phone, met for lunch when I visited Jackson. Our conversations were sometimes awkward, sometimes surprisingly comfortable, but always honest in a way they had never been before. The pain of those years didn't disappear. How could it? But it gradually transformed from an active wound into a scar that had shaped me, but no longer defined me. In my professional life, I continued to thrive mentoring younger women in tech and creating the supportive environment I had once needed myself. In my personal life, I deepened my connections with my chosen family while carefully nurturing the fragile new bonds with my blood relations. Looking back now, I realize that my refusal to sacrifice my career for Jackson's convenience wasn't just about standing up for myself in that moment. It was about finally claiming my right to prioritize my own needs after a lifetime of being taught they didn't matter. The value of a person isn't determined by how much they're willing to give up for others. Sometimes, the most loving act is saying no both for yourself and for those who need to learn to stand on their own. I learned that my worth isn't measured by my father's approval, by Stephanie's acceptance, or by my willingness to sacrifice my dreams for someone else's convenience. And perhaps most importantly, I discovered that family isn't always defined by blood or obligation. Sometimes it's built through respect, honesty, and the courage to speak difficult truths, even when they might not be welcomed. Now, when I look at the life I've built, I feel not just pride in my achievements, but peace with my journey. I know that my refusal wasn't the end of family, but the beginning of a healthier version of it. A version where everyone can grow, not just the favored one, while others are left behind. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Did it lead to healing or further separation? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own path. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth. Take care of yourselves and each other.